Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. It's always a joy for us to be in Chennai, and we also want to welcome those who are joining us online throughout India. And we have as Master said of his work, Lord, thou hast given this monk a big family, and certainly we are a big family in Master. So maybe people may be coming late, so those sitting on the floor in the front move up so others can come. So we will share a little bit, some thoughts on our topic this evening, how to love God, and then we will invite you also to ask us questions. This is such a beautiful topic, and to be honest, I don't think we've ever been asked to speak on it, so it's interesting to give it some thought. But in the Christian Bible, there is a very beautiful passage where Christ says to some of his followers, I was hungry and you gave me to eat, and I was thirsty and you gave me to drink, and I was without a home and you took me in. And the disciples said, Lord, when did we do this? And he replies, when you did this to the least of my little ones, you did it for me. And so we need to understand there are different ways we can grow in our love for God. And one of them is service to others. And if we can understand that it's not other people we are serving, but we are serving the God in them. This is a beautiful path to God, to developing our love for Him. I think most of you know that Ananda has started a beautiful work in Vrindavan called the Paramahansa Yogananda Public Charitable Trust. And we are serving, at this point, nearly 7,000 of the homeless widow mothers living in that city, giving them food and blankets and medical supplies. And we've started 9 care homes where about 250 women are living. And one woman said so beautifully last year at Deepavali, in the north we say Diwali, but she said for 25 years when Deepavali would come, I was alone living on the street. And now she's in one of our care homes. And she said, for the first time in 25 years, I have people around me who care about me. So this is God's work, not just that trust, but service to others. We need to understand that this is very pleasing to God. This draws His grace into our lives when we can serve others. And maybe you think, well, I work in an office or I just serve at home. I don't have a chance to serve others. But all of life is a service, all of it. When we serve our children, if we see it in the right way. You know, someone told me recently something very interesting that Swami Kriyananda said. Some of you met him, many of you not. But he was, for Jyotish and me, our lifelong teacher, and who really guided our steps in the spiritual path. And, you know, he served... Louder? Okay, I'll speak louder. And he served people all over the world with his, not only teaching, with his music, with his books, but he had a very devoted mother who served the family. She just was a housewife. She served the family. He had 2 brothers. She took care of them and the father. And Swami said to one of the Ananda members, he said, you know, I think my mother was more pleasing to God in her life than perhaps I have been. I'd never heard that, but my friend said, no, he said that to them. because he said the spirit with which she served her family was not just, okay, here's food on the table, here's clean clothes, but treating each one, serving the God in them. And Swami said, I think my mother was very pleasing to God in that way. And so we need to understand when we serve others, the God in others, that is a way of expanding our heart. And it's, as I say, it can be the grumpy, angry person who works in the desk next to us. But if we can always just try to see the God sleeping in that person, God's joy sleeping in that person, then we expand our heart sympathy. And that's really the essence of it all. We know human love. We love our friends. We love our, maybe some of our family. Maybe some of our family is more challenging. But human love is a stepping stone to divine love, to loving God. And so really the secret of loving God is to start where we are and keep expanding our sympathies. Swami said, if a little girl is playing with a doll and loving the doll and dressing it up and putting it in a little baby carriage, the mother doesn't say, oh, how stupid you are. That's just a little piece of plastic. What are you loving that doll for? The mother encourages the child to love the doll or love a pet or love a little toy animal, because the mother knows that that is developing the natural love of that child. And so the same with us. God sees, he's wanting us to expand our sympathies. And that's why we lose loved ones in our lifetime, because God's wanting us to realize, don't limit your love to just this person or these children or this family, because everything in the world will go away, but God's presence will not go away. And so we need to, through service to others, we need to keep expanding our sympathy. But another way that's important in our love for God, developing our love for God, not just serving others, but to, within ourselves, to break down our own personal attachments and desires, because everything that we think, oh, unless I have that, whatever it is, the bigger apartment, I can't be happy. Unless I have that better job, how can I be happy? All of these things, what are we saying essentially? We are saying, this is where my happiness comes from this material thing, from that new situation. And the more we can begin to say, nothing in this world, no advantage, no promotion, will really fill my heart with what I'm looking for. And so we need, if we want to love God more, we need to examine our attachments and desires in our life. And one by one, begin to just say, God, I can do without this. I can do without this. Some of you know the story, but in 1976, at Ananda Village in California, we were about 7 years into the community's history at that point, and we had begun to build the community, build homes and different facilities. And then a forest fire came, and the community was burnt to the ground. And Jyotish and I, we had a simple house there that he had built. It was a geodesic dome, and we had a newborn child, 11 days old, and we lost everything we had. Just the clothes on our back were all that we had left, and a little box of sacred objects from our meditation room, our puja room. And yes, it was hard. I can't say it was the easiest time in my life, but it was one of the greatest blessings in my life, because I began to realize, where does my happiness come from? Because I was forced to face it in a very dramatic way. I had no choice. And I thought, does my happiness come because I had a nice little room for the baby? Does my happiness come because I had a pantry filled with food? And I thought, no, I lost all of that. All of it's gone. But then here was this new little baby that, of course, you want to protect and take care of. And then I realized, no, the ability to find happiness and security in this world has to come from your own heart. It can't be coming from anything outward. We have met many people in our travels around the world. We've met very, very wealthy people, and we've met very, very simple people. And great wealth doesn't make people happy. Some of the wealthy homes you go to visit, there's tension, there's disharmony, and sometimes very simple people who know the joys of a simple life. There's much more happiness there. But either way, it doesn't depend on what's outward, but it depends on what's inward. And if we are able to discipline our mind to say, okay, God, you've given me this gift. Maybe it's a nice children or whatever it is, but I'm not attached to them. They're yours. It's all yours. And to look at all the things in your life that you are putting before your love for God, before your desire that says, I want only you. And we do this again step by step. For us, it was a dramatic thing, losing everything. We took place in about a few hours. But it was very interesting because for a few days after the fire, I was sort of in a state of shock a little bit, because mentally I kept waking up and thinking, where's my house? And then I had to go through the whole process. It doesn't exist anymore. And then what I finally did one afternoon as kind of a discipline to help me move forward and let go of the past was I thought about every single thing that I had lost in the fire, that we had lost in the fire. And I love plants, and so I had many, many plants in my house, a big window filled with plants, and I thought of each one of those plants and what I thought about it, and then I gave it to God. And I thought about the kitchen, every little thing I had in the kitchen, gave it to God. Clothes, gave everything to God. And by the end of, it took actually a few hours to do that, because I didn't want to leave anything behind. I wanted to give it all to God. But after a few hours, I thought I was so happy because I knew God had it all. I knew where it was. I didn't have to worry about it anymore. He's taking care of it now. And so really to look at the things in your life that you are attached to. It's not that we don't need things. We of course we need to be practical. We need things to make our lives work. But there's a difference between having them in your life and being attached to them, saying, if I lose this, I will be unhappy. And with Swami Kriyananda, our teacher, we saw many, many times where on another earlier occasion, our temple burnt down. Someone had left a candle burning at night and it caught the rug on fire or something, and the temple burned down. And Swami was so even-minded about it. He said, well, God gave us the temple and then he took it. And the more we can just give everything to God, the more we feel that everything comes from God. And then the more we can feel that, the more we love. You know, love is based on trust. We know this in human friendship. If you meet someone and over a period of time you see that they're a good person, they honor their word, they are considerate of other people, you begin to trust in your heart that, okay, this person is a nice friend. But if you meet someone and you see, they don't keep their word, and I hear they say things against me behind my back, then you don't trust that person, and your love doesn't go on a human level to them. And it's the same with God. Until we begin to trust that God really loves us, then we're a little bit protective. We say, well, I'm not sure he even knows I exist. Why should I love him? But again, that's part of the divine way of loving. Human love is often reciprocal. Well, if you are my friend, I will be your friend. But to love God, we have to say, however you treat me, Lord, I love you. Nothing will change that. Nothing. And there are so many beautiful stories from the lives of saints where they have been tested deeply and deeply. There was, again, referring to one of the saints of Christianity, our Guru Yoganandaji actually tells this story in one of his talks. This was Saint Anthony of the Desert. He was one of the early Christian saints. And he was being tested all the time. He lived in the deserts of Egypt, and he would live in the old Egyptian tombs, and all day he would just pray to God, pray to the Lord. But he was being tested with horrible demons that were attacking him. And this went on not just once, but for years he was tested. And then finally, it all came to a grand finale, and he felt as though he was going to be destroyed by the forces of darkness. And with all his will and devotion, he called out, "My Lord, help me." And then Christ was his guru, his Ishtadevata. Christ appeared to him. And all the darkness vanished, and there was only peace and love. And he said, "Lord, where have you," Master tells this story so beautifully. He had such a beautiful Bengali accent and rich, warm voice. And he said, so St. Anthony said, "Lord, where have you been all this time?" And the way Master answered, he said, "Anthony, I was just the same with you," meaning I've always been here. And so we need to realize God's ways aren't our ways, and he will test us. He will test our love. He will say, if I take everything away from you, if I burn everything up in a fire, will you still love me? And you say, I'm here, Lord. I'm not going anywhere. And so to build up that kind of giving up, at least inwardly, any attachments that you have, anything you place before God, and to have the trust and the faith that God loves us, and he is, all of our life's experiences are really just to help us to remember, help us to experience God's love for us. So to serve other people, to love the God in other people, and that means even when they're difficult people, and especially when they're difficult. Swami would often have around him, people don't understand this, they say, oh, people that got to be around Swamiji, they were very special, but very often he would have very difficult people that no one else could work with or be around because they had such difficult traits. And he would have them working with him because he was trying to uplift their consciousness. But then finally, so serving others, serving the God in others, breaking attachments. But someone asked us, we had a satsang last night, and I think Prem isn't here tonight, but he asked the question, and it's an important question. How am I able to think about God throughout the day, think of him more? And we said, thinking about God or loving God, it's not a mental exercise. It's not like memorizing multiplication tables or Tamil script or whatever it is. It's an experience. It's a state of consciousness. And to enter into that state of consciousness, we need to interiorize the mind. That's what we were saying last night to Prem, that it's only in the interiorized mind and the calm heart that we get in tune with what divine love is. The restless mind, the agitated heart, we can never know God's love that way. We can never offer God our love that way. But in the stillness and quietness, the aloneness of our own soul, the quietness of our own soul, as we sit in meditation and in contemplation of God and Guru, this is where that communion takes place. So that's why sometimes people get meditation and they misunderstand and think it's this technique and that technique and this pranayama and this asana, and that's all part of it. But Master would say, don't mistake the different steps of yoga for the goal. The goal of meditation is beyond the techniques. The techniques help us to interiorize our mind, to calm the heart. But that's where devotion begins, in that state. And it's at that point that we are able to commune with God and to feel His response. And it's a surprising thing because we can't, the spiritual path is not a predictable experience. Good evening, sir. Please come. We never know when God will come. We never know when we will feel the touch of His love. But we just have to be in that interiorized consciousness. We have to be always open to the possibility. And that's why Swamiji would say, when you walk down the street, try to just feel, not just think, but feel that God is in the breeze. He's in those two crows that are talking to each other. He's in we had a seclusion up at Abbott Mount recently near Raniket, beautiful time, and for about a week. And we just meditated for more hours than we usually do, and we're quiet and would go for walks in the mountains. It was a very, very nice time. And you couldn't, in that experience, you just feel the heaviness of your egoic consciousness just kind of dissipating, kind of releasing, and you just feel yourself as a child of God. And it's easy to feel God's love. And there's in the place, the guest house where we stay, there's a beautiful big tree. I'm not sure what kind it is, but it's many hundreds of years old. And it's all gnarled, and the branches go out at quite a distance. And just as last year when we dedicated the center, they brought in the banana trees, which are kind of a symbol of a new enterprise and blessing. And Kartik told us that the banana tree is kind of a symbol of God because every part of it is used, the fruit and the leaf and the branch and so forth. And we found that very inspiring. But we were looking at this beautiful tree up near Raniket, and you could feel how God was present in that tree. And we thought, look how much that tree gives. And probably for hundreds of years, it gives shade to all who come under it. It gives a shelter for the little birds and the little squirrels. Its roots go down and they break up the soil and make it rich so that other things can grow. It gives beautiful flowers for beauty. And the bark can be used it has many purposes, the bark of trees. And we began thinking, just that one tree, how much it gives. And that's one little part of God. And Swami said, when you walk in the world, try to see behind the form. See how God is smiling at you in the clouds, in the patterns of the sunlight. And the more you can live in this world with an awareness of the abundance that's coming to you all the time, then your heart becomes very full. And it becomes our master wrote a book of talks about God, and he called it the divine romance, the romance with God. And this is really what life can become. But we need to train ourselves, just as when we want to learn any new skill or any new language or whatever it might be, we need to say, I don't yet know how to do this. And the same with loving God. Inwardly, the soul, of course, knows how to love God because we are a part of God, but we need to develop the attitudes and the practices and the perspective that enables us to love God. And then finally, I'll just close, and Jyotish can also share. Ultimately, the very nature of God is love. And so when we say, how do we develop love for God? I think the better question is to say, how do we feel our oneness with God? Because once we begin feeling that oneness, the love of the heart just flows and flows. And in the beautiful example we have of these great, great masters and saints, Yoganandaji, Kriyanandaji, the love that they shared with the world, the love of God, it changes people's lives. It awakens them to their own potential, to love without any conditions, to love without any barriers, but just to say, my very nature is love, and that's who I am, and that's what I want to more and more, not to identify I am young, old, man, woman, profession, whatever it might be, but when someone asks you, who are you? You say, I am divine love, because that's who we all are in the core of our being.
I'll speak briefly and then we'll have time for questions and answers. As Devi was saying, we're part of God, and because one of the fundamental aspects of God is the vibration of love, that's one of our fundamental aspects. So the soul, we don't need at the soul level to ask, how do we develop love? Because it's there. Just when we're walking around, we don't think, how can I learn how to breathe? Well, we need to learn how to breathe better. We have pranayamas and diaphragmatic breathing, but we don't think, how can I breathe and get oxygen? It's just so automatic that it's just there. So it's fundamental. The power of love is fundamental. On one level, it's what is central to the feeling nature that we have. On another level, it's fundamental to the very existence of the whole universe. In the movie, The Answer, many of you saw in Coimbatore last weekend, but there's a beautiful scene that Swami is with Master, and Master says to Swamiji, what is it that keeps this earth revolving around the sun? And Swami thinks that Master is asking him some fundamental astronomy questions. And he said, well, you see the force of gravity that the sun has is trying to draw the earth into the sun. And Master said, oh, well then what is it that keeps the earth from being drawn into the sun? And Swami says, well, it's the centrifugal force of the earth going around the sun, and that keeps the earth trying to resist that pull of gravity. Master said, oh, and left it at that. And it was many months later that Swami realized that Master didn't need any lesson in astronomy. He was using that as an example or as an analogy for our relationship with God, that God is drawing us to Him, but we have a momentum that is carrying us away from God. And that momentum that carries us away from God is one might say, the contractive force of the ego. And so as the energy, we're fundamentally unified with God. We're part of the sun, one might say. But because we want to maintain a separateness, the power of Maya that creates duality, that functions in us by us wanting to move away from unity into just the thought of I and mine and me, I, my, me, mine. And the more we move in that direction, the more we feel nobody loves me. God doesn't love me. God doesn't even exist. God doesn't care about me. But at a fundamental level, God is, Master said, we couldn't take a single breath without God's love. Our heart wouldn't beat without God's love. That same power of gravity that represents the force of gravity represents the force of love expressed on a physics level. So two objects are attracted to each other by the pull of gravity, which tries to draw those two objects together. And so here we are on Earth, and the Earth has a big gravity, one might say, force, and we have a tiny little gravity force, but we're being pulled to the Earth. I don't think anybody has prayed to God, oh, please, God, give me gravity. Don't let me fly off into space. Give me gravity. Oh, I'm so afraid that you aren't pulling me to the Earth. That's the same in one sense of saying, oh, God, you don't love me. Don't let me fly off into loneliness, into aloneness. God is always pulling us to Him. But the stronger the force of ego or separativeness becomes, the less we're able to feel that. And so that's why Master and all the great masters say that one of the most important things on the spiritual path is to awaken devotion, awaken our love, because it counterbalances that pull of ego. It counterbalances that pull of separation. Because when we develop devotion, what devotion is using our mind and our heart to try to increase the attraction of God. And so how do we do that? Well, mostly because we're in form, we need a form to love. And that's why God comes in the form of these great saints and great avatars, because we can relate to them. And so one way of increasing our devotion is to look at Master's picture, or look at the picture of a saint and try to tune in. Master said especially look at their eyes and try to feel the quality of their eyes pulling us to them, and try to attune ourselves to that, and try to offer our love and our gratitude and the heart's energy to the Guru. And the more we do that, the stronger that attractive force becomes. And then we can begin to really feel our love. And the reciprocal, we can feel the Guru's love for us. And if we can do that strongly enough, powerfully enough, Master said that if we can hold in our visualization the image of the Guru deeply enough and long enough, the Guru will appear. He will manifest in vision or in reality. But we have to train our minds to work in that way. Master also said that chanting was half the battle. Now that's a very, very powerful statement. You know, we, especially here in the South, but here in Chennai, which we're most used to for southern India, there's a love of music. There's a natural understanding and attraction to chanting. And so you're already halfway there if you love to chant. And so continue to chant, because if you think about the chants that Master has given us, they're almost all love songs. That's really what they are. Take anyone, maybe the one that's most common that we sing all the time. Swami mostly sang this toward the end of his life. Door of my heart. Think of the words, door of my heart. Open wide, I keep for thee. Wilt thou come? Wilt thou come? Just for once come to me. Isn't that a love song to God? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for thee night and day. Again, that's just such a beautiful expression from our heart to calling to the love of God and wanting that sense of unity to increase. Well, I would suggest, and I'll end with this and then we can take questions and answers. I would suggest that you find one of the chants, one of the love songs that particularly resonates for you, and then chant it over and over and over again for many days, maybe many weeks. Master said that he took his chants and he chanted them until he brought them into superconsciousness, and that imbued them with power. And so if you take a chant and you chant it once and your mind is distracted and it isn't paying very much attention, it'll have a little bit of power, but it won't have very much power. But take Door of My Heart and sing that as a real love song and really love God, love Master while you're singing that. Visualize Master. Wilt thou come? Wilt thou come? Just for once come to me, and do that over and over again. That breaks down the momentum of the earth trying to spin away from the sun. It breaks down the momentum of the ego trying to keep us separated from God. And it produces in us such a desire for that unity that it goes past the mind and past the preoccupations and past even the subconsciousness into the superconsciousness. And when that happens, that chant will resonate over and over and over again. Swami wrote a beautiful song, Lord, how shall I love thee? With every breath I breathe. And if you take a chant and take it deeply enough, you'll find that it repeats itself by itself with every breath we breathe. You'll wake up at night, that chant will be going in your mind. You get up in the morning, the chant is resonating. Throughout the day, it just comes spontaneously, because the power of love is what holds the universe together. And our soul knows that power. It lives in that power. And it's just the whole of the spiritual path is dissolving the ego that wants to keep us separate. And loving God is the surest way to do that. Okay, we'll chant Door of My Heart, and then we'll take some questions. Now, as we chant this, don't let your mind wander. try to get really into it. Master said, and we'll do it this way. Master said, first chant out loud to awaken the energy. Then chant a little more softly so that we can get behind, get into the real bhav of the chant, the feeling of the chant. Then chant quietly so that we get deeper into it. Then do whisper chanting and try to get behind the words themselves into the feeling of the chant. And then finally I'll play the harmonium and we'll chant just silently. But at each stage, try to allow your heart and mind to get more deeply engaged in this. But especially because this is a love song, chant this with real love in your heart. Open wide I keep for thee, door of my heart. Open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me. May my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord. May my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Now visualize Master in the forehead and sing this to him as if he's right here in this room. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me. May my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord. May my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Now, softer but with more intensity. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me. Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me. Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days whisper chanting, but let the words be secondary. Let your love be the primary thing. Just for once come to me. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me. My days fly away without seeing thee, my Now just silently, but with deep, deep devotion. Shanti, shanti, shanti.
Let's not do Q&A.
Yeah, Devi's right. I'm feeling the same thing. Let's not do questions. It'll bring us back into the mind. And when devotion has been awakened, you don't want the mind to come back and intrude. Let's just,
I have a blessing.
let's meditate for a few minutes, and then we'll have a blessing at the end.